I'm Tighe, I'm reporting for Fuse FM, and today I'm here at the John Owens building, which has been the scene of demonstrations, protests and an occupation this week. It all began on Wednesday, when after an emergency general meeting failed to reach quorum, a group of students protested and declared that they would march on the BBC. Instead of going to the BBC, they came to the John Owens building and the administration facilities at the University of Manchester here, marched into that building behind me and then occupied one of the corridors. The occupation lasted almost 2 days in the John Owens building. Student Conrad Sinke told me how the protest came about.
I went to the general meeting to just push for this agenda to be put forward because I agree with everything written on here, but the meeting didn't reach quorum, which meant there wasn't 500 people there. But the reason this happened was that there was about 480 people at least, and there's people stood up at the back, but the doors were being blocked by a group of people at the back. The doors were blocked and people weren't allowed in. Well, since then, everybody came up here, first of all, just occupied the corridor and started making a list of demands which we wanted from the university to support this. So we started looking at these demands that we were putting forward and changing them to make them relevant to the university and to give to the Vice-Chancellor.
Students' Union Communications Officer Robbie Gillet told of how the Vice-Chancellor, Gilbert, responded to their demands.
The Vice-Chancellor came and chatted and spoke to the large groups. It took about 300 people, I'd say, roughly, taking part in this occupation, peaceful, non-violent occupation. And there was a back and forth between the Vice-Chancellor. I think that was really good because one of the problems with the Vice-Chancellor and the student body is that the only contact they have is through the student union representatives. I'm one of those, but that is not a healthy amount of dialogue for a student body to be having with the person who runs their institution that they live at for 3 years.
Gilbert, president of the university, warned of the long-term consequences.
It's a normal part of university life. I think it's proper for students to be committed to causes and to feel very fervently about them. This is obviously a really important issue in the world, so I'm not surprised, and indeed I'm pleased that our students are engaged in big issues. Having said that, it's clear that the demands the students are making on the university are in many cases not demands a university should properly accede to, because they involve creating precedents which can spread right across the political spectrum and trap universities into, in the long term, getting aligned with all kinds of political positions, not just this one. So while we encourage expressions of dissent, we tolerate a very wide spectrum of opinion in the university, it's proper that they're expressed informally and prosecuted informally than that they become part of the university's policy framework. In the long run, it's difficult because there are a lot of people who work in that building, and so the idea that this can persist until we meet their demands, given that we can't meet their demands, is it's going to lead perhaps to a need to intervene to end it at some stage.
The protest was eventually removed from John Owens, but moved to occupy first the post room and then a room in the Simon building, where it is continuing. Meanwhile, protesters launched demonstrations in support outside the building. I spoke to one of the leaders of the occupation, Gabriel Hassan, about how it was going.
Well, I think the longer we go on, the more we realise that the university isn't like one big block institution. It's got all these different parts, and so the longer we sat here chatting to security, the more they realise that we're all right, and the more that we realise that they're all right. So we're actually getting on all right at the moment with security, bringing cups of tea, playing PlayStation with them or whatever. But as so far goes university management, the tack they're actually taking is to completely ignore us. So we're phoning up all the senior managers and they've all been told to say our diary's full. So we're finding it difficult to press our demands on the university.
Lectures are still taking place in other sections of the building, but even on a protest, students have to have the bare essentials. With opinion divided and a university yet to respond, the future of this protest is far from certain. Gabriel told me of some of the highlights and challenges of the occupation so far.
The toughest challenge, I think there are a few moments when it's very hard to stay awake. And it's just when you're inside for such a long time in the same room, God, the cabin fever does kick in, and sometimes you just got to get out for half an hour and have a walk around. Funnest time, just down here last night we had a few sleeping bag races, which was a lot of fun. But eventually we got told by security to quiet down because they couldn't hear the film they were watching.
Now, as you can see, the occupation is still continuing on the second floor of the Simon building. In that corridor, there is still a massive group of protesters that are planning to defy the university no matter what happens. However, with the university management growing increasingly anxious, no one knows what might yet happen. Reporting for Fuse FM News, I'm Tighe.